Hello and welcome to UK Versus. Today we're talking about the Smiling Titan. A character is quickly becoming the boogeyman of competitive Season 3 Universes 2024. The Smiling Titan is a character that is comparable to younger Toguro, Ojiro, and a lot of these high impact, high aggressive characters that were causing issues for players throughout the history of the game, in all honesty. And with the erratas to Mikasa, Reiner, and Bertolt, and receiving its own functional errata to make it stronger, I think the Smiling Titan may become an issue as we go on. So the Smiling Titan was a character that was introduced in Attack on Titan Battle for Humanity that is a 6-hander with 31 health and is on the death and life symbols. They have two very powerful abilities that do tend to synergize with each other as well. They have an enhance, which allows them to give an attack plus X, where X is the difficulty of the attack, but thankfully -4. Attacking at +1 speed, +1 damage on a 5 diff attack. That's very cute, very mid, and would be a very well-balanced character that some players could abuse. But with Attack on Titan Battle for Humanity, we did get the Titanic attack. He's a high-statted, high-difficulty attack that this Smiling Titan can then push even further into the realms of unblockable, especially early on. But I'll touch on that when I've gone through the abilities. The second ability is a once per turn response that is now tenacious, that allows the Smiling Titan to ready if an attack does 6 or more damage. This means that the Smiling Titan can use themselves to pass checks and then ready themselves up once an attack has done damage. That is very important, very powerful ability for the Smiling Titan to have. So what makes the Smiling Titan so oppressive? It's a twofold issue to do with the new 4-check attacks and how well statted those attacks actually are. The Smiling Titan is what falls under a 4-check tribal character. This means that it is a character that is running no less than 4 checks and is running a lot of 6 checks to offset the high difficulty of these attacks. They're also running things like research and league interview, which will push their attacks even higher and allow them to check even better, especially early on. So for example, if on their first attack turn, Smiling Titan launched a Ravagers of War and they checked a 6, which was bolstered to a 7 thanks to league interview, they could tap their face and still have an 8 high for 8 damage on face with having to commit no foundations from an 8 diff that then takes away an opponent's resource by destroying a foundation, gets a card out of their hand, makes them lose momentum if they've got any, and then Smiling Titan can make it a 12-12. If this is your first attack turn, your opponent is going to struggle to stop a 12-12 on face. That is huge, that is powerful, and you haven't had to commit anything. And when Ravages of War then deals damage, even if it's a half block somehow on that 12 speed, you're then going to ready Smiling Titan because you've dealt 6 damage. That's why those abilities are so strong, and that's why these attacks are so powerful. It allows a Smiling Titan, especially one that's going first, to apply a lot more pressure to 6-handers and 5-handers. It allows Smiling Titan to push a lot harder into 7 and 8-handers and basically be saying, if you haven't got the exact defense, you just die. It does leave itself open in the long game, and that is how we beat the Smiling Titan. We play for the long game. I know a lot of people just want to build decks that progress their singular goal and basically go, okay, these are my foundations. All they do is bolster my attacks, let me get lots of damage in, and allow me to kill you. And that is a perfectly acceptable way to play, don't get me wrong. But against the Smiling Titan, you will be caught lacking. If you are going second and you build 5, keep 2 in hand, you're not blocking. You cannot block a 12-12 Ravagers of War. You cannot block a 14-12 Titanic Leap. You may be able to block a 9-12 Attack Titan attacks. You could possibly block a 10-10 Female Titan attacks. You're more likely going to block an 8-8 Jaw Titan, but do you see where I'm coming from there? You're burning a lot of resources very quickly, and they're just going to get taken up. And even if you block the first one, if this Smiling Titan is checked well, you're not blocking the second one. You're certainly not blocking the third, especially turn 2 when they've gone first and you're on the back foot with how much can I build and how much can I defend. We'll talk about what cards you need to run to stop the Smiling Titan after I've just gone through this a little bit. So the Smiling Titan is running a lot of 4 checks, a lot of 5 checks, a lot of 6 checks to ensure that they're not overextending their resources, but at 31 health, they are not worried about dying early. There are very few characters that can get through 31 damage turn 1, turn 2, except of course high roll. High roll Godzilla, high roll Reiner, possibly a high roll Eren could do it, but a lot of characters need to take a little bit more time to set up. And as UVS have said, they're trying to make games, yes, go quicker, but have the most important turns be turn 3, turn 4, not turn 2. And the Smiling Titan unfortunately has kind of snuck around that mentality and does now make turn 2 very doable. The big issue the Smiling Titan has is progressive difficulty. Unlike our more average characters that are playing with 4, 5, 6 different attacks that can pass their first 1 or 2 attacks without to commit any resources, the chances are the Smiling Titan will always have to commit resources to pass checks because of how difficult they are. Even if the Smiling Titan cannot use League Interview and other means to pass the first check without committing any foundations, they're always going to have to commit on the second. It will always be a 7, an 8, a 9, a 10, 11 diff attack, which means even if they check a 6, they're still going to have to commit 2, 3, 4, 5, which can leave them vulnerable on the backswing. But if the Smiling Titan is not threatened by you, then they're not going to be too bothered. It is a double-edged sword. There is a lot of high diff attacks coming in, and your strings are not going to be as long. But if that allows you to judge how much you want to commit to this attack string, and it still allows you to have defensive resources up, meaning although you can take a hit, doesn't mean you want to take a hit. It's very Nomu-like. How do we defend against this kind of monster? The biggest thing is making the attacks more manageable. There are some great characters that will allow you to make these attacks a lot more manageable. One that was reviewed recently is Izuku Midori on the move. For the low cost of committing 1 foundation, you give this attack -3 speed. That is huge. That turns all of your foundation to speed hate. -3 speed might not seem like much, but it is very impactful against characters like Valentine, especially early on, where you're going, cool, you're giving it +4, I'll give it -3, and I still have all these other resources. My offensive foundation that gives me damage is now a defensive foundation. That's very cool. Then you have the absolute bane of Valentine's existence, which is Rodan. Rodan can not only check the top of their decks to make sure they're going to pass their checks for defense, but they can also give you a lot of minus speed, and the entire game plan of Rodan is to kind of build with minus speed and blocking in mind. So whereas you're giving +4, Rodan is more likely giving you minus, and because you're having to expend so much more resources than Rodan, the chances are they're going to outpace you. But if you do catch them lacking, if they don't have the defenses, they are very susceptible to return to kill, because if they don't draw ultimate defense or they don't get the right things on top of their discard, they're still not stopping a 14-12. Then you have your speed reduction characters on face like Hihei and Jin. Jin doesn't do much against this deck. It could possibly stop an EX, a stun, or a powerful, but it's not really going to be that impactful because they don't have enhances, they have blitzes, but they're giving -2, -3 speed on face. And then you have Mothra, who is a great counter early on because you commit Mothra, and yes, your opponent has given it, let's say we're going with Titanic Leap, it's a 10 for 8, your opponent gives it +4, and so it becomes a 14-12, and Mothra basically goes, yeah, that's cute, I'm going to give it -8, and I'm going to turn it into a 6-4-12. A 6 is still not completely blockable given depending on your build, but Mothra does have that opportunity to basically go, I'm going to shut you down early. The main issue is in the long run, having enough defensive ability or enough momentum to keep doing that. In terms of other things we can do, so if you're not looking to play Jin, Hihei, Rodan, Mothra, what can we do within our decks to slow down? First of all, speed hate. Get that attack as low as possible so you can block it. There are lots of speed hate cards which are very cool. You've got things like Nice Try, Unsettling Aura, you have got Ice Gliding, you've got cards such as Traumatic Scene that'll commit and give -2 to 3 speed. You have got Graceful Maneuvers, which I do love, but it's not the best here because it requires you to have more things in your card pool to get more speed reduction. And against Stringers, that's cool because you can usually get to -4, -5. Against Smiling Titan, you may not get as much. The fact that you have to commit is also an issue because you're going down a defensive resource resource, but you are reducing the speed down. It's about making sure you use these resources on attacks that you're sure you can block. If you cannot get it low enough, if you've got 5 foundations, this is a 14 speed attack, and you have a +3 block mod in hand, that's a 17. So with 5 foundations, if you commit 2 for -4 speed, you're looking at 30. You're still not passing that check. So there's no point using those resources on that attack. It's about making sure you can get it low enough to the point where you can block it. And a great way to do that is with the other side of defensive -speed, the flip. You've got things like In Control, Fast Friendship, Cooperation Offer, all of which allow you to flip the foundation and get -2, -3, etc. speed. And that can make things a lot more blockable whilst keeping resources up. If you've got 5 foundations up and you've got 2 fast friendships, you could get a 14 speed attack down to 8 and still have 5 foundations up. That means that if you check a 5, you can block this. That's cool. Yes, let's go. There are other cards like Nothing to See Here and Fortifying the Walls that can allow you to reduce speed. However, they take more time to set up, requiring momentum, requiring to be out for a few turns to build up counters. It becomes a lot more of a pain. Resetting the speed is a great option. Using cards like Citywide Crisis, Shocking Revelation, and the character Haynes can allow you to reset your opponent's attack to its printed speed, and having those cards in your stage can even put your opponent to a point of, do I even want to use my ability yet? Because it's just going to get reset. That also applies to the other side of it of zeroing them out, which allows you to use things like Pageant Queen and Barrier Shield to reduce the speed to 0, making it a lot more blockable. And Barrier Shield even gives you Breaker, which I'll touch on a little bit, and as to why it's such a good response to use against the Smile Time. I would be remiss if I didn't also mention Eden Box. Eden Box resets to both speed and damage to printed, which is very, very cool, very, very powerful. And once it's reset back to printed, you can then start using your other speed reductions to get it even more blockable. They do come with a hefty cost. Usually, Citywide Crisis requires a remove, I believe, so the Shocking Revelation. Pageant Queen also requires move, and Barrier Shield is a card out of your hand, making you less likely to defend. Barrier Shield is a tough one with the Ravages of War Smile Time, but it's still possible. You can also mitigate how much you're losing through damage reduction, using cards like Deflect to reduce damage you're taking. You can use Dragon's Fortitude, which requires momentum, to reduce damage you're going to be taking. You can use a Weapons Clash to destroy foundations, reduce the amount of damage you're taking. Or if you have got momentum and you're playing characters like Mirio or Reina, you can reduce that damage to 0 or 1. And you have Invincible Body, which is one of the strongest counterplays to Smile Titan, because it just sits there and it's your first enhance, so you do nothing but stare your opponent waiting for them to Smile Titan, so you can destroy it and reduce their damage down to 0. Invincible Body creates an impasse where your opponent cannot really increase the damage of their attack, because then you can just reduce it down to 0. If you cannot reduce the damage down and you are just looking to reduce speed and block, breakers and progressive difficulty pushers are a great way to go. Runaway is a great example of a progressive pusher that reduces down damage. Yes, you're still taking some through the life loss to pay the cost, but it's a lot less than Smile Time would be dealing you. And you add a card to the card pool, making that progressive even harder. And that is why breakers are so important. Using cards like Twisty Surroundings to reduce the checks of attacks, using Shigaraki Free to reduce the checks of attacks, using breakers and Keiko's aids to reduce checks and increase difficulties, basically can take the attacks your opponents are doing and make their turns even shorter. Smile Titan is not here for a long time, they're here for a good time, and you can ruin that with breakers. Using Breaker 2, Breaker 3, you can either force them to overcommit on their next attack or stuff a foundation or action or asset into their card pool to play around the breaker and play with +1 progressive for the rest of the turn. It's a great way to kind of handle Smile Time, and very early on it can keep you alive, but you have to be able to block, use those abilities on the breakers. Twisted Surroundings and Shigaraki Free you don't, and it's a great way to force them to overcommit or burn attack from their hand. If you force them to fail an attack with Twisted Surroundings, yes, they can play another one, but they've gone from 6 hand to 5 hand, which is always great. After that, you can just go for the delete attacks. If you won the dice roll and were able to attack first and your opponent didn't block, you could have momentum for things like Decoy Duplicate duplicate condescending explanation. You can use cards such as Genkai's Guidance and Cape of No Return to just delete those attacks completely, and also force them to commit out resources to play the attacks. That's one of the great things about Genkai's and Cape and these cards that force them to delete, is that your opponent has to pass the check before you delete them, as well as characters like Toru 2, which then after they've paid the check, you force it back to the hand and go, cool, you had 5 foundations, you checked a 4 on that 8, you've committed 4. You cannot reliably pass this check. Yeah, if you check a 5, you're golden. If you check a 6, you're golden. If you check a 4, though, your turn just ends. And I can also guarantee this is the only attack you're throwing this turn if you play it again. Toru 2 is very powerful and can force the game to go a lot longer and has access to very powerful defensive cards as well. The main issue is Toru 2 can't kill back. You're kind of sitting there doing chip damage against Smiling Titan, knowing that 2 of these attacks will kill you. The other thing I would really emphasize when facing off against the Smiling Titan is deadlock threats. Just because you can defend, just because you can force it to the late game, unless you can keep them at 10 foundations, they will just build out. They will go to 15, 20, 30 foundations, because that means they can string, and they can string like the rest of us. That is a dangerous aspect. If you take Smiling Titan off its 1 or 2 attack turns and put it into 4 or 5 attack turns, you are dying so much quicker and you are forced into a really bad position. So having relevant deadlock threats, which forces Smiling Titan to stay where they are foundation-wise, that they stay at the 10 foundations, is one of the keys to keeping Smiling Titan in a box and beating it. The best way to beat Smiling Titan is to punch it as hard as it's punching you and put them on the back foot as well, or to drag it more into the long game where you're just going to, as with Toru 2, chip away with some decent damage whilst defending. It's very risky because if you get caught with a block zone you don't have, you can just die. So you need to be able to make Smiling Titan respect your aggression and not overcommit, whilst also forcing them into a long game where you have enough foundations that you're able to beat them. It sounds very tough. It is very tough, and it's not the ideal situation, but unfortunately, that is the way to do it. You've got to respect the Smiling Titan's offensive power. You do not overextend. Feel free to fail attacks, take some turns to build, and get yourself in a position where you're in control of the game. Do not let Smiling Titan dictate control of the game. So what do you think? Do you think the 4-check meta was a mistake? Should some of these have been 3 checks? How would you handle the Smiling Titan, or are you playing the Smiling Titan? Are there any characters I missed that are great at handling the Smiling Titan's offensive power? Or is there an even bigger threat out there that I need to address? As far as I'm aware, Smiling Titan is one of the biggest ones at the moment that hasn't already been addressed by multiple other content creators. What tactics are you using to control the Smiling Titan? And if you're a Smiling Titan player, what tactics are you using to get around that control? Let me know in the comments below. Do reach out if you have any ideas or if I've missed anything that I can do a follow-up video. And I will catch you in the next one, my friends. Peace.